A Passion for Mushrooms by Chrononautical. Chapter 3. Unlooked for Assistance. The royal kitchens of Erebor were massive. The east wall was entirely ovens, each one big enough to roast whole oxen. There was counter space enough to suit 100 cooks all working at once. By the pull of a lever, roaring fires could be hung with copper-bottomed stew pots big enough to boil Bilbo and Bomber together with plenty of room for saucers. Yet the kitchens were sized for dwarves, so there were built-in staircases alongside the giant pots, chopping blocks of a perfect height, and spits made to be turned by small hands. Bilbo was quite comfortable helping Bomber there when he was needed. However, helping with a meal was not nearly the same as being responsible for one.
"I am sorry we do not have much to showcase your mushrooms with,"
Bomber led Bilbo regretfully through the massive larder.
"I'd like to offer pork, but every sow that is not gravid with piglets ought to be made so, and there are only 2 bones in tail at the moment that has not already gone into my ovens. There's a little venison, as Keely brought me 4 good-sized stags from his hunting trip yesterday, though of course they have very little fat this time of year. Other than that, we only have spring chickens and fish, and there is always fish." "Aye, my friend, but we have black trilbies. With those we can make a feast fit for a king."
Bomber grinned.
"You and I have both seen the king chew crab while marching to forego stopping for lunch. He is not a particularly discerning eater."
Bilbo scoffed.
"Well, we shall make it a meal fit for his table, and since the 2 of us will be sitting at it, the standards there will be high."
The Bomber laughed. There wasn't really time for jokes. Bilbo set one of the apprentices to chopping nuts for stuffing, and the other to jointing a deer. The hobbit couldn't quite bring himself to trust the young laborers with sorting and cleaning the mushrooms, but he readily showed Bomber how to do it, pointing out the overripe ones that ought to be set aside for stuffing as well.
"An old Shire recipe, this stuffing?"
Bomber asked, making good-natured conversation. It was Bilbo's turn to laugh.
"Waste whole trilbies to stuff a spring chicken. Any homemaker in the Shire with their salt would have my head for the crime. No, I shall have to make the recipes up as we go, for the most part, but don't worry, I know the flavours well enough. It's nothing to the wealth of Erebor, of course, but I was rather well-to-do in the Shire. I could manage to get my hands on a few black trilbies here and there when I wanted them." It took Bilbo a long moment to realize that Bomber's hands had stopped working. When he looked up, he saw an intense expression on the dwarf's plump face. "What?" "Nothing," Bomber blinked. "Only, if we're really to make this a meal to remember, we might put a few more hands to use. Word will get around that you're cooking for the king, and most of the mountain will turn up in the hall for a taste. I've a few friends that might help trustworthy Dwaro in the kitchen, and they'll come if I ask."
"If you think it's best," Bilbo agreed, mentally doubling the amount of stew he'd planned to make. "Only I won't let anyone but you fuss with the trilbies." Grinning, Bomber promised.
"They'll only do as you instruct. My word of honor on it."
Indeed, in half an hour he was back with 3 dwarves who did not have the young, eager look of his apprentices. These dwarves were serious older Dwaro and reminded Bilbo a little of Gloin and Dori. Introductions were made, and the hobbit came to know that the dam with wooden beads in her elaborate grey braids was Darrow, the dam with gold beads in her yellow beard was Kira, and the chap with silver ribbon binding his black beard in a tight trap was Gorful. After letting them know that he was charmed and at their service, Bilbo put them straight to work. There was no time to do anything else. Bomber's friends were interesting. As promised, they did only exactly as instructed. When Bilbo asked Gorful to clean the chickens, Gorful demanded that Bilbo show him how to do it. So the hobbit dutifully showed the dwarf the trick of scalding the bird in hot water for a minute before plucking it, and how to grip it just so in order to get the giblets out intact for mushroom gravy making. Once Gorful had seen Bilbo do the first bird, however, he got to work expertly stripping feathers and perfectly cleaning the next bird in a third of the time it had taken Bilbo to demonstrate. Kira did not know how to debone a fish. At least she apparently did not know how to debone the first fish. After Bilbo did another demonstration, however, she started flipping fish after fish across her cutting board with such efficiency that her knife seemed a blur. Darrow needed to be shown how to properly peel a potato, of all ridiculous things, but Bilbo showed her,
and he could not call it a waste of time, not once she got to work and filled one of the enormous boiling vats with bushel after bushel in short order. Another time Bilbo might have accused them of toying with him, especially since Bombur seemed to be doing the same thing, but they were a great help given how little time he had. Anyway, if Bombur hadn't needed a thorough lesson on sorting, cleaning, cutting, and cooking with black trilbies, he would have been the one mounting a defense of the mushrooms instead of Bilbo. Soon enough, the hobbit came to appreciate the unusual approach Bombur's friends had to following only exact instructions. "Nope!" Bilbo yelped. No, you cannot mean to put perch into that roasting pan. Are you mad? Have you been struck around the head? Speak up if you have, for we can continue very well without you if you must go and see oin.
You said to put the filleted fish into the roasting pans, said Bombur's hapless apprentice. They are to be broiled in the brown sauce.
I said to put the trout fillets into the roasting pans, I'm quite sure. Perch in brown sauce it would drown. Ever thirsting, never drinking, my right eye. The perch is to be sautéed lightly on the stovetop with the clear sauce.
The apprentice blinked at him.
She was very young, and her thick brown hair had more of curl to it than most dwarves could claim. In that moment, she reminded him of a puzzled little lamb encountering a fence for the first time. Realizing the problem, Bilbo sheepishly took the lass by the hand and showed her the differences between the smaller foot-long fish and the big heavy meat of the trout, taking special care to point out how light and thin the flesh of the perch was. Then he took himself off for a moment, whisking together melted butter, eggs, and a few of the choicest trilbies in a small dish. He put it off to the side to rest a while. In another bowl, he sifted flour, brown sugar, salt, baking powder, and a few carefully selected spices. Then Bilbo stirred the lot together gently, watching the disparate ingredients become smooth silken batter. When he put it into the oven to bake, he was the calmest he'd been in weeks, so we buckled down to work for another hour. It was a wonderful group to work with, for once everyone fell into the rhythm of their tasks, they also fell into one of Bilbo's favorite dwarvish traditions. They sang! Some say elvish wine is sweet and fine, singing poetry unto the stars and the vine. Others swear by the mead from the hive, or so sing princes of men when they thrive. But I sing Lee-o-lee-ay, my darling dear, don't give me none of that stuff. Just give me a beer and a bit of good cheer and a couple of orc heads to bust. Excuse me, everyone, Bilbo said when the hour had passed. Darrow, if you and Kira could help Gorful get those last few chickens into the ovens, I would so appreciate it. Thank you. The potatoes can wait. In fact, everything else can wait. Please come over here and have a seat. The mushroom stew wasn't quite done yet. As was often the case with soups, it would get better the longer it simmered, but it was hot and all of the vegetables were cooked. Bilbo ladled out 7 big bowls and set them on a clean, unused patch of counter. Then he cut his special loaf into 7 even slices and set those out as well, one for himself and one for each of his helpers. I know dwarves don't have second breakfast or elevensies, but we all missed lunch, and it's now gone tea time. Dinner will be in 2 hours, but we've been working hard. If we're hungry, we'll make mistakes. Or possibly sneak away and eat most of the ganache, and that would quite ruin all of our work. So please, the roasts are in the ovens and the prep is done. Let's take a short break. With hearty approval of this sensible plan, the dwarves all sat and quickly helped themselves to the little meal. Bilbo himself was so intent on his own bowl that he did not look up to see if the others were enjoying their food at all until he heard Darrow's sharp little, "Oh! Is something the matter? Do you not like the bread?" Darrow was frozen, her hand still halfway between her chin and the table, but she chewed slowly before speaking. "You did not just create this recipe today," she said with certainty. "No," Bilbo agreed anxiously. "This is Baggin's black bread, quite famous in the Shire. It's never failed to win its category in a baking competition." When she didn't respond, he continued nervously. "My father taught me the recipe just after my 20th birthday, when I started to prove I wasn't completely useless in the kitchen. He had it from his Aunt Pansy Baggins, who had it from her father Baldo, and so on back to my 7 times great-grandmother Begonia Baggins. The story goes that she found a whole basket of black trilbies while walking in the old forest. She had been a toque by birth, so it is not as unusual as you might think that she went walking alone out there. But to find a whole basket, of course that was enough to experiment a little, and so she hit upon the idea of making a mushroom quickbread. My great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather quite approved of the results, and therefore, whenever she got her hands on a few trilbies, she would make it for him, tweaking the recipe over the course of her lifetime. Once it was perfected, she passed the secret down to a favourite son, and so it eventually came to me. Do you not like it?
It's delicious,
Bumper said reassuringly.
I like it,
Darrow agreed, taking another thoughtful bite and closing her eyes.
Do I taste nutmeg?
Perhaps. Bilbo smiled into his own soup. Or perhaps not. As I said, it is a secret recipe.
You would not make it for the dinner?
Gorful's slice was all gone, and he was eyeing one of the apprentices' plates covetously. Serve quickbread at a big dinner! I should die of shame! Bilbo said. Besides, all of that ganache we made would go to waste.
We could put the ganache on the bread,
Kira said, lingering over the last morsels of her own slice. Bilbo laughed. Unspoiled both in the combination, I've no doubt. Besides, quickbread is for tea or elevensies, perhaps second breakfast, but it is certainly not nice enough to serve at the king's table in the great hall when the dwarf in question has been promised a feast.
This is nice enough for anything,
said the fluffy-haired apprentice, who then promptly looked embarrassed to have spoken. Flushing with pleasure, Bilbo tried to retain some semblance of modesty. I shall make it again for you sometime, if you like.
I should certainly like, Bumper said. The rest of the company ought to taste it as well. I cannot believe you travelled so long with us and never shared that you had such a secret.
Ah, yes, agreed Bilbo, who did not like to think of travelling just then. Yes, the company should have it, and perhaps I may even teach it to you, before I must go away. I quite like the thought of a Shire recipe and the name Baggins remaining part of life inedible, not just as a footnote to the story of the dragon or the Battle of Five Armies, but as a thing that can be touched and tasted.
I would be honoured.
Well, you and the company are as much my family as any hobbit bearing the name of Baggins might be, perhaps more so in the case of my cousin Lobelia.
It is a good recipe, Darrow said. Well worth the preservation of your family secret. But the dishes you make for dinner tonight, they are all of your own design?
Oh, yes, Bilbo said, draining his water goblet and gesturing for the apprentices to clear away the evidence of their little meal. Though the clear sauce for panfish is of my design as of about 15 years ago, and my trilby mashed potatoes have been the delight of many a Shire dinner party in their own time, always on a much, much smaller scale, of course.
Of course,
Bumper said.
And given the scale involved with tonight's menu.
Yes, do let's get back to work, Bilbo agreed.